Do we know why syphilis went around so easily at that time?
Well, there was a lot of unprotected sex, and unprotected sex wasn't just the fact that it's fun to have sex and why not. It's not just that they weren't thinking about the future because they literally thought, well, I could be killed at any day. It was a tactical thing. You needed a wife in every port. Blackbeard had several different wives on different islands because if he was captured for a minor crime, he could have a character witness and she'd be like, "Oh yeah, we know he's lovely. He's a really good father, and he does all of this and that." That's what you needed in order to sort of get off the minor stuff that Otherwise, if you got caught for a minor offence, you could end up like Al Capone. He wasn't caught for what he did. He was caught for a minor thing, and that locked him up for it. Or if there were pirates, you get hanged. But yeah, so that's why I think that it was particularly, and also it wasn't understood at all as to it was understood that it was sexually transmitted, but it wasn't really understood as a disease in the same way that we understand it. So it's very hard to avoid,
Yeah. Was this
particularly
still
when you
pre-germ
were told
theory?
that. Sorry,
Was this still pre-germ theory?
think so. Yes, yeah, certainly because Pascal is like much later, but yeah, I'm trying to think because you've got it was after we knew about bacteria
Mm.
because Anthony van Leeuwenhoek, who's a tailor from Delft, I think he was the guy who he kept writing to the Royal Society. You have to understand, Royal Society really up themselves, really posh, and he was a tailor from Delft, so he had these little he had glass beads that he was looking through, and he basically invented the world's microscope because he was trying to do thread counts. But of course, he was a man, so he didn't just look at silk. He looked at, oh look, there are animalcules in my cheese, and of course, he's the guy who discovered sperm because he's a man. What's he going to look under his microscope at? And he was writing to the Royal Society in English, not in Latin, saying there are animalcules in my bits, and it was just one of my favourite things is spermist theory. It's not about pirates, but it's great. They used to, right? He basically would get illustrators to draw what he was seeing through this microscope, and he was a bit elaborate. Okay, so really accurate sperm. He drew the really accurate sperm, but then in the sperm head, he claimed to see a homunculus, which is a tiny, perfect man inside that little bit of sperm. Okay, so and everybody's like, oh, this makes sense because when the sperm goes into the empty vessel, the thing that doesn't matter very much, when that goes in and implants in there, then it turns into a fully formed human. And okay, she might shape it a bit, but that kind of makes sense that it would be all in the man's, thing and the church loved this idea because it meant that every single homunculus is a perfectly formed human, which meant all the male ones had testicles with perfectly formed sperm inside them with perfectly formed humans, and each of those had perfectly formed humans, and each of those had perfectly formed humans. And this meant that obviously when God first created Adam, he had already pre-made the entirety of humanity in his own body. And that is, it made so much sense. Then they ruined it with genetics. I mean, really, it's just terrible. But yeah, and it was when was Spallanzani? I think he was about the same sort of time as this. So Spallanzani was the Italian guy who put trousers on frogs, just to see if they still were able to produce offspring. Not because trousers made the frogs unsexy, but they would stop the eggs and the sperm meeting. And he found out by making frog trousers that sperm and egg had to meet in order for there to be reproduction. And I think that's about this sort of time. It must be. I
Took
think
took
maybe
putting
maybe
pants
that's
on frogs.
1730s or something. But anyway, that's got everything to do with pirates right there. But yeah, no,
Next
syphilis
book.
was a huge problem. So much so the Blackbeard he had syphilis and was so overcome by it. He actually nearly ruined everything by holding up the town of Charleston just to get some mercury so he could just do something inappropriate with it. I won't tell you how he administered the mercury. Am I allowed to tell you how he administered the mercury? Is
Yeah,
that
I think
how
it's. I think
basically it's historically accurate, guys? But if you don't want to listen, don't listen. So you'd get a needle, a long needle, and you'd put that needle all the way up into the bladder and inject it. Not nice. It's not. I've seen these needles as well. They're really quite like biros. They're thick. They're not nice.